Hi, my friends. I just love to talk to you tonight. You know, we're all living through some very difficult, challenging, even frightening times. The entire world is. In what seems like in the blink of an eye, it's as if the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, has brought life to a virtual halt. It's driven us indoors in an attempt to keep us out of harm's way. Everything's shut down. Gatherings of all sorts, sporting events, theaters, concerts, conventions, as well as synagogue activities, Shabbat services, all are being put on hold. For the vast majority of us, we've never experienced anything like this. It's disruptive, it's upsetting, it's scary. And the scare is that if one contracts the virus, one's life is in danger. One must fight off the virus with one's own immune system, nothing more. We're told that older people are more at risk, especially those of us with underlying medical conditions, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, lung disease. By the time one's in one's 60s or 70s or 80s, or good for you if you're in your 90s, it's hard to be this age without one or more of these medical conditions. And while our JBS audience is comprised of viewers of all ages, the majority of our viewers are on the older side. So we are the population most at risk. And it's hard to know with certainty the degree to which any one of us is in real danger. It's hard to know because it's been so hard to get simple, direct, complete answers to the questions all of us have. So in a moment, I'm going to try to get some answers for all of us. I've been as frustrated, by the way, as many of you, that there's so little definitive information about the coronavirus. We've been told to keep our hands clean, to wash, use disinfectants as often as we can. There was to keep our hands out of our mouth, nose, and eyes. I don't know if you've seen Rabbi Mark Schneier of the Hampton Synagogue came up with this cute reminder. He tells us all, stay away from men. Men, by which he means mouth, eyes, and nose. Cute. So we'll all try to do that. But it's amazing, isn't it, to realize how often our fingers touch our mouth, nose, and eyes? And we're told that many people will contract the virus, and symptoms will either be minor, may even go unnoticed, though will be communicable during that period of time. Young people, especially children, seem to be pretty safe from the virus. And except for the older demographic, we're told the vast majority of people will recover if they do contract the virus. But beyond that, it's not really clear. How does the virus work? And what's absolutely necessary for us to stay safe? Now, it may be unclear because the medical field really does not know enough about the virus. But I want to ask the question so many of you have and that you wish would be answered. So I spoke earlier with Rabbi Dr. Aaron Glatt. He's the chair of the Department of Medicine at Mount Sinai of South Nassau, where he is also chief of infectious diseases, which makes him exactly the kind of physician we'd like to speak with. And by the way, in addition to being a doctor, Rabbi Glatt also serves Congregation Anshe Chesed and Young Israel of Woodmere, Long Island. And on March 5th, Rabbi Dr. Glatt took part in a conference call through Yeshiva University to discuss the coronavirus. Here's my conversation with Rabbi Dr. Aaron Glatt. So first of all, Rabbi Dr. Glatt, it is so lovely of you to give us a moment of your time. Thank you for joining us on JBS.
It's my pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Look, you know, the biggest problem seems to be a lack of information. This may be a function of the medical profession simply not really understanding much about the virus. So I want to begin by asking you, how much do we know about how the virus operates? And I want you to understand, if I ever ask a question to which the answer is, you know, we don't know, that to me is a legitimate answer. But I want to begin by asking you, do we understand how the virus operates?
So the correct answer to that is we certainly do not understand everything, but we're learning more and more every day. And there are some things that we are pretty comfortable with, and there's some things that we're less comfortable with, and there's some things that we absolutely just don't know at this point in time.
I see. Do we know how it is communicated in all of its ramifications, or is communication one of those issues we've not yet quite figured out?
So we know a lot about how it's communicated, and it's important for people to know what we do know, and then I'll point out the areas where we need more information.
Excellent.
So the most important thing about this virus is that it can be transmitted, especially by being in close contact with another person who is sick. And that is the most important public health message that we can get out there, is when you're sick, don't be near other people. Because whether it's COVID-19, whether it's the flu, whether it's just a cold, or whether it's some other illness, you're going to potentially infect other people. And we need all to do everything possible to not have one person infect many, many other people in a large group setting. So the most important thing to understand is that this virus can be transmitted by being within 6 feet of someone else.
Okay, and what I want to understand is, I've been told, and again, we know so little, is this a virus that is airborne?
So it is transmitted via droplet nuclei. That's the fancy word that we use for, yes, it can be transmitted in the immediate surroundings of the person, but it's not going to go to another end of a room. So the word that we use for airborne is something like measles or tuberculosis, which can be spread throughout the room. So here it's going to be spread mostly around the person. We pick a number of about 6 feet in the circumference around where the person's at the center of that 12-foot radius diameter circle, 6 radius on one way, 6 on the other side, in front and in back. And in those areas, the droplets that are coughed, sneezed, or brought out by that person will stay suspended in the air for a little bit of time, and then will land on objects. And by coming into either direct contact with the air or by touching the surfaces that are still contaminated, and every surface the virus can live on for a different amount of time. It depends on humidity. It depends on many other factors, how contagious the person is. That's a way you can transmit it.
Okay. I want to again just clarify. I'm in a room with somebody, and it's somebody who has the virus. All they're doing is breathing. But if they're breathing and I'm within 6 feet, I'm in danger of somehow inhaling the virus.
Yes, I would point out that you have to be there for a significant amount of time. If you're just walking through the room and you find out later that a person in that room had it, but you just walked in that room, you're in an extremely low risk. So we define a significant risk as being in the proximity of the patient for 10 minutes.
Interesting. 10 minutes. So if I am visiting a relative and I'm in the living room with that relative and that relative is infected with the virus, I'm sitting on the couch with my relative. If I'm sitting on a couch, even though he never sneezes and he never coughs, he's just living and I'm living. I'm at one end of the couch and he's on the other. If I'm with him for more than 10 minutes and that person has the virus, the reality is I could contract it.
Absolutely. Now, it's not a guarantee. It's a chance.
Okay.
It will be different for different people. It'll be different for other circumstances. But, yes, it's certainly a possibility. We would say that person has been exposed, and that person should self-quarantine for 14 days.
Okay. Does the virus have to enter the blood system?
So the virus enters into the body. There are data that suggest that it can be detected in the blood, but it certainly isn't going to be detected in the blood most of the time. But it probably is in the blood, but that's not that important from a clinical point of view, nor from a diagnostic point of view. We don't use blood tests at this point in time to detect the virus. The most efficient way, and we're getting better and better at this every day, that we can detect the virus is from respiratory secretions. And that means that you put a little tube inside the person's nose or in the back of their mouth and sample their secretions, not saliva, but cancel what we call nasopharyngeal or oropharyngeal secretions. And that way you can, on laboratory testing, identify that that person is either positive or negative for this agent, COVID-19.
Very good. Some people have said that the way the virus enters the body is through the mouth, nose, and eyes. Can it enter in other ways into the body?
No. At this point in time, we have no evidence that any other route is a concern.
Okay. What about a sore one has on one's hand or any other part of the body which might be touched by a hand which has the virus on it?
So that's an area where I would have to say the answer is not fully known. I don't think that that's a common method. I can't say with absolute certainty that it's never occurred.
Okay, so the main thing is to keep the virus away from one's mouth, nose, and eyes, correct?
Correct. That's why we recommend that people not touch themselves, and they should wash their hands after they've come into contact with certain either situations or with certain people. That's why we're recommending that people not shake hands. That's why we're recommending that people keep their distance socially. Even if you're having a conversation with somebody, both of you are healthy, don't be on top of them. When we have people sitting at a conference table, we say spread out a little bit. When we're giving a shear in a shul, we're telling people spread out a little bit.
Okay, well, what you're trying to do is get them away from 6 feet within proximity of each other, yes?
Right. That's called social distancing. And we'd like to, even in communities that don't have spread, and absolutely in communities that do have spread, there may need to be even stricter measures. We need to make sure that we're practicing good social hygiene, I call it. Social distancing, proper hand washing, proper cough and sneezing etiquette, the proper disposal of tissues. All of those are excellent ways that if you don't follow the rules, you can spread virus.
Okay. I assume if one wears surgical gloves, that they're protected from catching the virus on one's hand. Is it prudent to wear gloves whenever one leaves one's home and then immediately discard them when one reaches a destination or returns home?
So we actually say no. That's not a smart thing to do because people feel a false sense of security with gloves and they don't wash their hands, they don't replace the gloves. When a physician walks into a room of a patient, so they wash their hands before they put on the gloves, they go into the room if they're supposed to be wearing gloves, they wear the gloves, and then they take them off immediately before they leave the room, and then they wash their hands. People that are walking around all day, touching everything, not washing their hands, leaving those gloves on are actually going to transmit illness and not prevent them from getting illness.
Okay. How long do we believe the virus remains alive on a person's hands?
So that's what I mentioned before. We really don't have hard data on that. It will be dependent upon a number of factors. We're assuming it can be for some period of time, but I can't give you an answer to that.
And I understand, again, we know what we know and you know what you don't know. Unfortunately, the issue of the length of time a virus lives either on a person's body or on other surfaces ultimately will be crucial in determining the extent to which people are at risk or not at risk. So I assume we do not know how long the virus lives on metal or wood, a desk or a doorknob.
We do not have definitive data. We normally suggest that it's somewhere in the vicinity of several hours. It could be more than that. It could be less than that. It would depend on, again, other environmental factors. It depends on how much is on it, the inoculum that the person had who produced that specimen, how sick they were, how contagious they were. There are many variables that people like to have an answer that. They want to know 2.5 hours. There's no way that anybody could ever make such a statement for any particular case. You can only give generalizations.
Okay. If I said to you, does it last 6 hours or longer, would your answer be maybe?
My answer would be I don't know.
Okay. Because you understand, if it turns out that there was an amount of time that the virus lives, and one is in a room or with somebody for longer than whatever that length of time is, at that point, one would be theoretically safe from contracting the virus. The problem is you and the medical profession has not yet been able to determine what that length of time is. Do I have it correct?
Yes, but it's not going to be days, and it's not going to be seconds. It's going to be probably a period of time of hours, and we do recommend that people clean these rooms. High-touch surfaces should be cleaned on a regular basis. That's just good general hygiene.
I understand.
As well as very appropriate in this situation.
All right. At the moment, people are frightened. And what I'm trying to do is understand the extent to which there are certain things which we must do to protect ourselves. And there are things which, and you're a rabbi as well, it's ultimately a siyag, that we create a pattern of living which really goes significantly beyond what is necessary, but we do it so that we don't come up to the law and begin being too close to the danger. It seems to me if people are at home and they go to sleep at night, and they're fine when they go to sleep at night, if for some reason they've brought this into their home, by the time they wake up in the morning, the virus is dead. And as long as they stay at home and do not go out and bring anything in, they can be pretty much assured that they don't have to worry that in their house the virus is lurking. Do you feel that I've said it fairly?
Correct. But however they got that virus into the house in the first place was their exposure. They may already be exposed. If somebody is going into a clean house, he's guaranteed that he's not exposed, so then there's no way he'll get it from his house. All
right. And I'm saying you walk in from your house, you've been outside, you've touched the doorknob. The first thing you do is you wash your hands under warm water with soap for a period of time. In theory, this takes care of any virus you might have picked up by touching a doorknob. And now your house is basically safe. And people do not have to walk around the house feeling that this virus is lurking somewhere. And I keep asking you, am I overstating it, or are you comfortable with what I'm saying?
I'm comfortable with what you're saying, assuming the person wasn't already infected.
Correct. What about on one's clothing? Do we have any idea whether the virus, if virus gets on clothing, is it the same problem that one would have if it were on one's hands?
So clothing is probably a slightly different likelihood of persisting there. It would depend on the fabric, it would depend on many other factors, and as I said, we really don't have a clear understanding.
Okay.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I do have several other things that I'm going to have to do, so I'll ask you for your last question. Please.
Okay, my last question. By the way, is this a sexually transmitted virus? If one kisses someone with the virus, is there a good chance they will be communicated? If one has sex with someone who has a virus, is there a good chance they will be communicated?
So there is no evidence that has occurred, but that's because chances are if you're going to be kissing a person, you've been in their environment, you're around them, so it's very hard to prove what caused it.
I see. It's not that it's in bodily fluids per se.
Right. Well, certainly in respiratory it is. So if you're exchanging, potentially respiratory secretions when you're kissing somebody, that would be a highly effective way, a direct inoculation almost. We have no evidence. I'm not aware of any data suggesting it is or it isn't in seminal fluid.
Rabbi Doctor, it has been wonderful that you gave us some time, and I know how overwhelmed you are. You're being pulled in 20 different directions at the same time, so you could find a moment for JBS is very kind of you. I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha. You should stay well, you should stay healthy, and you should continue to give the kind of service you're giving to all those who benefit from your wisdom and your medical knowledge. And again, thank you so much for being with us on JBS.
It's an honor. I'll say amen, and the same to you. Mir Hashem, everybody should be healthy, and everybody should hopefully follow the rules and do everything they can to maintain health, including davening.
Amen, amen. Thank you, Doc. The thoughts of Rabbi Dr. Aaron Glatt, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Mount Sinai of South Nassau. Now for a somewhat different perspective, dealing with the psychological effects of the virus. I also spoke with Dr. Rafi Kalman, a director of Yeshiva University Medical School, who is currently school psychologist at Solomon Schechter Day School of Queens, New York. Speaking to him from his home, here is my conversation with Dr. Rafi Kalman. Dr. Rafi Kalman, thank you so much for giving us some time here on JBS. I'm most appreciative.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We've already talked with somebody about the extent to which it is communicated easily if one is in close proximity to another human being. It sounds like, although it's not called an airborne virus, the virus acts very much like an airborne virus in that even if one is not touching another person, if one is simply within the vicinity, 6 feet or closer, one can catch the virus even if there's no sneezing, no coughing, no touching. Do you see it the same way?
That seems to be. I mean, there's a lot of information out there. I'm not a medical physician, so I don't know that for certain, but it does seem to be very, very easily to catch.
Okay. I want to know the extent to which I can ask. I'm going to ask you some medical questions. If you're not comfortable, you don't know the answers, you just say you don't know. But
well, I'm a psychologist by trade, so
I understand.
I don't.
But
okay.
Do people come to you and say to you, "What can I do and what can't I do?"
In what regard?
Into how they can live their life right now. Psychologically, what's happened is people are very, very frightened. And what they're frightened about is they know so little. Now, I don't know if they know so little because they just haven't been told. And when I say they, I mean, has the public not been told clearly enough because no one's had the opportunity to sit down and talk to them about it? Or do we not know because, in essence, the medical profession does not know? So I would imagine people are frightened all the time. As a psychologist, they come to you. They're looking for guidance. I could imagine they're asking you questions about how they should live their lives, and you can either say to them, you know what, I just don't know, and that would be an honest answer, or you do have some answers. And so I begin by simply, putting you into that, that section of doctors who either do have some idea of how this virus operates, or you don't really have any idea of how this operates, and the questions that are appropriate to address to you are, how does a person psychologically get through the day when they're very frightened of getting something they have no understanding of? Where do you fit?
So I think it's a great question. As a psychologist who treats anxiety disorders, we're constantly helping patients understand that we live in a world of uncertainty all the time. We would like to think that we have control over things within our lives and our world, and there are certain things which, of course, we do. But when it comes to things like viruses and the spread of viruses, particularly novel ones like this, there really isn't much that we know, whether it's the newness of it or what's being shared with us or whatever the reasons might be. We really don't know. And so what I've told patients, I've been talking with a lot of my patients since this began, even though I'm in quarantine. I've been speaking with them over the phone and via Skype. And what I really kind of try to instill in them is the idea of living with the uncertainty, of, following the advice of medical professionals, whether that's washing one's hands or staying out of large crowds, sure. But short of that, kind of going about your life as normal and accepting the uncertainty, just like we accept uncertainty all the time, right?
Okay.
When one goes to work,
I'll tell you my problem. in general, I understand your attitude, your approach, and what you're trying to help people with. Under normal circumstances, what you're saying makes perfect sense. I've lived a long time. I have never, ever seen society close down like it has now. I'm a child who grew up during not only the Cold War, the atomic bomb scare. We had drills, where you go, and if you're in school, what you do. If the Russians send over atomic weapons, it was never this way. I never saw the NBA close down. I never saw Broadway close down. I never saw every synagogue in the world closed down. I was never exposed to what's called a pandemic. So I believe the comments you would make under normal circumstances as a psychologist, at the moment, they are insufficient. The questions that you must be able to answer is, what's the difference that is driving society to shut down? And basically say to me, it's not about washing your hands. It's about don't leave your house. It's not about washing your hands. It's about don't hug your children. Don't sit on the couch with your children. Don't drive in a car with your children because you don't know who has it. And I'm talking about adult children who are out in the world, and all of a sudden, if you go into a parking garage and you park in a parking garage and some attendant is going to touch the door of your car, is going to touch your steering wheel, and then 3 hours later, 1 hour later, 6 hours later, you go to pick up your car. Are you in danger of getting this? And I don't understand why. I've not heard anybody explain to me why we are treating this disease, this virus, different than we have other viruses. It's compared to the flu all the time. But nobody ever told me about the flu. Don't sit with somebody on a couch.
But if you look, I agree with you. I think that the level of panic is like nothing I've ever seen before or read about. But I think much of it does come from a place of uncertainty. If you look at the statistics, there are fewer people that are dying or being hospitalized from coronavirus than there are from the flu. Yet, as you said, they don't tell you don't hug your child during flu season. And I think what's happening is because there is a total unknown and lack of control, that there's this mass hysteria. And I do believe that all of the government officials are acting from a place of care and concern. But I think at the same time, they're acting and reacting, I would say, from a place of anxiety and fear, because they are fearful that if it's that contagious, that everybody should separate. But the truth is, Mark, if it's that contagious, we're all in big trouble, and it doesn't matter whether we isolate or quarantine or not. And the statistics don't indicate that it's as dangerous as perhaps the level of reaction is. And that's why, as a psychologist, I look at it and say, yeah, it may be that dangerous, but whether it's that dangerous or not, there really isn't very much that we can do to, quote-unquote, save ourselves. And so the choice that we have, and this is how I kind of pose it, is either we can lead our lives and try to enjoy it to the best of our abilities in the here and now and hope for the best, or we could live our lives in fear. But if it is indeed as dangerous as you're kind of saying, then it really won't make a difference. So we may as well enjoy the time that we have. And that's kind of psychologically how I try to approach it.
By the way, I'm not saying, I have no idea how dangerous it is, so I'm not saying anything. But you are correct that we're being told it's very communicable. Nobody has said, however, what you just suggested. Nobody said that if you don't take certain precautions, you are still liable to get the virus. We are being told all the time, if you wash yourself, wash your hands, you keep your hands away from your mouth, nose, and eyes, and it seems like that is the way in which the virus enters the human being. So that if one does not touch one's mouth, nose, and eyes, if one stays away from people one doesn't know is not uninfected. If I'm with my wife and my wife's with me, and we stay in our home, and we only stay in our home, she's not going to affect me. And I'll watch TV, and I'll have dinner, and we'll live a life, and nothing will. And sooner or later there'll be a vaccine, and sooner or later and maybe the warm weather will kill the virus. I'm told it doesn't live above 80 degrees, which makes no sense to me at all. Because if the human body is 98 degrees, why doesn't my body kill it? But nobody is suggesting what you're suggesting, that we shouldn't, that we are doomed as a human species. We are being told by Dr. Fauci, this has nothing to do with a politician. Dr. Fauci says to us, wash your hands, stay inside, we should close theaters, we should close arenas, we should close synagogues, we should close meetings, and we should just kind of live sequestered. And I say to myself, if you are right, doctor, that this is no more at the moment, there's nothing to indicate it is worse than the influenza. And we're not told to do any of this for the influenza. Something doesn't feel right. There's a feeling that Americans have. We're not being told something, or it's not about a politician panicking. It's about Dr. Fauci panicking. And it's hard for me to believe that you think if Dr. Fauci is panicking, he isn't being realistic. And if he's being realistic, that's where the panic comes from. So I say to you again, I want to hear you. I'm saying again, I don't understand the wisdom of what you're telling people who come to you as if, you know what, just go live your life and don't worry about it. Of course we're going to worry about it, and we're not going to live our lives, and we're told by everyone, everywhere, don't live your lives. And the proof is you can't go to a Broadway show now. You can't go to a basketball game. I don't know if baseball is going to be closed down. It's in open arenas. My guess is baseball will be canceled. Synagogues are not holding services. The only way people can enjoy Judaism now is going to be through JBS. That's the reality we're living with.
Well, first of all, it may be great for ratings for JBS if that's the case.
No, I don't need it for that reason.
No, I know. All joking aside, listen, as a citizen, as a human, I am in no way suggesting when I say go about our lives that anyone should defy what we're being told by the government and by medical experts. I've been in quarantine. It's my 10th day in quarantine. Thankfully, we're fine, but we're following the orders because that's what we've been told to do. So I'm not suggesting when I say go about your life to ignore what Dr. Fauci or anyone else is saying by any means. They're obviously working with what they believe is best to stop the spread of this virus. I'm with you. It freaks me out. It makes me scared when I see multi-billion-dollar industries like the NBA closing because you start to ask yourself, what are they not telling us?
Exactly right.
What I'm saying is purely from a psychological perspective. Yes, we have every understandable reason to be scared and to have that anxiety. I'm not saying I don't share in that anxiety. What I'm saying is there isn't very much that you or I can do to alleviate that anxiety in a situation such as this.
I disagree. I disagree with you. If somebody said to me, Mark, if you stay at home, you wash your hands, you don't expose yourself to other people, for a period of time, you're not going to go to the theater, and you're not going to go here, there, anywhere, and people said that if you did that, the chances of your getting this virus, it's not, a fog. It doesn't come out of a movie like The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's not like I have to stay in my apartment or my home and worry that it's going to seep through under the door and come and get me. It can only get me if someone who is infected either sneezes on me, coughs on me, breathes on me close enough for me to get droplets of whatever comes out of their mouth, or I touch something that has the virus and I don't clean my hands. I'm told I do not have to worry, and neither do you. You don't have to worry, I'm told, if you follow these procedures, and that's why Broadway is shut down, and that's why the NBA is being shut down, so that you don't have to worry.
Well, I think I would say that they're doing those things to reduce risk and to reduce worry, not to eliminate. I think in your analogy of I lock my door and I stay with just me and my wife and there's no contact with the outside world, that I'm 100% safe. I think that's what the anxiety part of your brain would like to establish.
You mean it's not
so
true?
I'm 100% safe. The problem with that is that reality doesn't exist. In other words, even if you're locked up in your apartment, how are you going to eat? Food has to be delivered to your home. And so the guy who's delivering that food to you, you don't know what he touched or what touched the milk that he delivered on the way there. And so there will be this panic and this fear in our minds, even if we take the steps that are being recommended. And I'm not against those steps. I think those steps are fine, but we have to acknowledge that they are significantly reducing risk of infection, but they are not eliminating risk of getting it. And the anxious part of the brain knows that.
Fair enough.
Which is why even people who are locked in their homes are still fearful, because they know there's still some chance of some exposure in some way.
Would you go to a restaurant these days?
I can tell you, Mark, having been locked up here for 10 days, I have a list of places I want to go when I get out of here. I would follow the advice of the medical professionals, whether that's the CDC or the Department of Health.
I haven't seen any advice about whether I should be eating at a restaurant or not.
Yeah, I would.
You would?
I would.
You're not worried that somebody who's preparing your food might cough or sneeze and hand you a plate full of what, or that a plate you're given was used by somebody before you, or a fork or a knife? You would say the chances of that are so slim that I'm going to be happy going to my local diner.
Yeah, that's a risk that I'm willing. I've been taking that risk my whole life. Right? I mean, if you rewind our lives back a month or two.
When you say that, you undercut your message. We've never been in this situation before. You have not done this before. If you do this now, after being quarantined, by the way, people should know you're quarantined, but you do not, there's been no indication that you have the virus. The problem is you're believed to have been in proximity with somebody who did, and as a result, you have to be quarantined for 14 days, and you've completed 10 of them as we talk today on JBS. But the reality is that when you leave your house, whatever you do next will be different than you ever have done before. You've never lived in a world where the NBA was canceled, where Broadway was canceled, where synagogues were canceled, where the borders are closed to people coming from Europe, let alone China, from Europe, where Israel is telling people, you've got 14 days. If you come here, you're going to be quarantined for 14. You have to promise us, you have to prove to us, if you come to Israel, that you have someone to stay with in quarantine for 14 days. And by the way, right now, foreign nationals should get up and leave Israel. You've never lived in that world. Don't tell me this is something you've done your whole life. Every single thing you do now, until this virus is under control, you've never done before. And that's the anxiety. And the reality, it's more than it's the reality.
I agree with you, and I am as anxious as the next person, but the way that I manage that anxiety is by accepting that whether I go to a restaurant and the waiter might have corona and is touching my plate, wiped his nose, whatever it might be, if I decide I'm not going to eat out and I just go to the supermarket and buy my groceries, the person who delivered those groceries to the store could also have had corona. So in my view, going to a restaurant and eating their food is really not any different than buying food from a supermarket. because the risk of corona is the risk of corona. In other words, if I'm willing to leave my home at all, then I'm accepting a certain level of risk, which I agree with you. It's seemingly higher now than it's ever been in our lifetime. I'm not disagreeing with that point. I'm just saying that I think when you say I'm going to avoid these things in order to feel more secure, that might only be a false sense of security that you're providing for yourself, because I don't believe there is such a thing as more at risk or less at risk. I think even when they say staying out of large crowds, I think they're just playing a statistical game of roulette. You're more likely to catch something if you're in a larger crowd because there's more likely to be someone there. But if I'm in a room with one person and that person has it, then I'm going to get it. And if I'm in a room with 500 people and none of them have it, then I'm not going to get it.
Okay,
and so it's really only a likelihood question, a mathematics question, but it's not a factual question. The facts are there's a lot of things we don't know, and we at some point have to accept that uncertainty, which is scary, which is very scary, because we love to live with as much certainty as we can have, but these are crazy, crazy times.
These are crazy, crazy. You're absolutely right. By the way, I disagree with you that if a person wanted to, we're talking about cutting risk. A person could cut their risk enormously if they follow what we're being told. Although you're right, you can be, if you have one person, and you can catch the virus. But as you said, your chances of catching the virus, if you were in the middle of 100 people, is greater than if you're in the company of 1 or 2 or 5. In addition, if this matters to you, it doesn't sound like it matters to you. It sounds to me like if the NBA were not canceled and you enjoyed March Madness, you'd go to March Madness and you wouldn't worry about it, and you'd say, listen, I'm going to live my life. I went to March Madness before, I'm going to go now. The fact that if they don't cancel it, I'm going. If there was a Broadway show running, you want to go to a Broadway show, you'll go to a Broadway show, even though at the moment Broadway is shut down. I understand. But if you are saying to yourself, and I believe many of my viewers are, and also remember, the viewers of JBS tend to skew older. They're in my age bracket. And people who are above the age of 60, we're told, are more at risk. And people who have underlying medical conditions. And the older you get, the more you have underlying medical conditions. I believe the people who are watching now, and not everybody on watching JBS is 60 or older, but many of them are, they're asking themselves, okay, I want to live a life, but I want to minimize risk. Now, the reality is you can buy packaged foods that have never been touched, and the package is touched, and you bring it in and you wash it off or you use whatever disinfectant. It's not the same as going to a restaurant and having food prepared by somebody in a kitchen. So all I'm saying is, if the goal here is to reduce risk, and by reducing risk, the difference between also you and I want to make people feel as safe as is realistic. And I don't want to say to them, you know what, just live your life. What I want to say to them is, I want to give you the best strategies we know that will allow you to live as full but as narrow a life as safely as possible. It's been very hard for me to find physicians who will talk to me in that context. And I understand for you, it's not fair. This isn't your area of expertise. I will continue to look. I'm going to continue to chase, to find doctors who can answer questions like, do I take my car to a garage, or should I avoid that? Not because it'll mean I'll never get the disease, nor does it mean I will get the disease if I do park in a public lot, but that your chances of getting the disease, the virus, are reduced if you do certain things, if you adopt certain strategies. And what I want to do for the JBS audience is define to the extent to which it is definable, what are the strategies which a prudent person should use?
Yeah. I am 100% in agreement with you that those are guidelines that we need. I agree with you. People who are elderly or have pre-existing conditions and things like that need to protect themselves. And I believe that we should follow what the CDC is saying and should stay indoors and should protect ourselves. I'm only talking from an anxiety perspective. In other words, how do you manage your anxiety? Number one, you need to follow the advice of the medical professionals to reduce risk. Absolutely. We need to do those things. I'm in agreement with you on that. What I'm saying is that even your couple who is locked in their apartment and has nothing and you know is minimizing their risk significantly, they will still be living anxiously. That's what I'm saying. And you're right. They're safer statistically, and I'm happy that they're doing that, and they should do that, right? What I'm saying is that once they've taken those precautions, once they've followed the guidance of the CDC, and I'm glad there's people like you trying to track down physicians to give that advice, to let them know what is most best for them to do. We need that advice. But once you take those guidelines and you engage in those behaviors that are suggested, at that point, you have to accept risk. That's at the point. So I don't think you and I are disagreeing.
No, the way you say it now, I think you say it beautifully. And if that's what you were saying from the beginning, I'm sorry it took me a while to get there. I believe what you just said is exactly the right attitude, and what you're teaching us is very, very important. And again, you've now put it into the context of you do what you can, and I'm saying if you do what you can, it's not that your risk is zero, although it sounds to me like it's getting very close to zero. And probably not everybody's going to get it, even if they don't wash their hands. But it's going to be close to zero. At the same time, when a person decides with the people they love what the strategy is, at that point, they can begin to let go of the fear and the anxiety. And that's what you're encouraging us to do.
Correct, because I think we live in times where the anxiety can get the best of us, where I think people are having a very hard time, is even when they take all of the precautionary steps that are recommended, they're still anxious because to many people, a 0.01% chance is too big of a chance. And that's what I'm saying is do what you need to do to get it to that 0.01, but then you have to accept that at some point it's out of my control, and I just have to hope and pray.
Yes, although as long as we're all in 0.01, and I know you mean that symbolically, if we've cut the risk enormously, our chances of getting through this also are enormously high. And I want the JBS audience, and I want all my friends, and I want my children, and I want my family to understand we should take the precautions that we need to, and to do that, we have to be told how this thing works. And one of the things that's most upsetting, I don't know how you as a psychologist deal with this when people come into your office. When people come into your office and they say to you, "But we don't know. If I knew, I could deal with it a little bit better." So I'm just hammering away that we have to know, and we live in a world, Doctor, where the media takes everything and just runs with it in the most frightening way. There's an attempt by mainstream media not to calm people down, but to do the opposite. And it's sensationalistic, and it is evil in my mind. I believe that at the moment, much of the American media is evil in the way they are handling this. And it doesn't belong, it shouldn't be politicized. It shouldn't be exaggerated. It should be handled. I wish people on CNN and MSNBC and on Fox and on PBS and on the networks were doing exactly what I'm trying to do. Force doctors to answer the questions which deal with how do I navigate my life day to day, not eliminating risk, but decreasing the risk so significantly that, as you are saying, one can live and enjoy life even if one doesn't go to a basketball game or a Broadway show.
Correct. Even if they don't have all the answers.
Right, right.
Because I think, unfortunately, you are to be commended for trying to get those answers. Unfortunately, I don't think there are a lot of people that either A, know them, or are B, willing to put their hind on the line.
You're right.
And say them publicly. And so there will be a level of uncertainty that we'll have to live with. But I commend people like you. I agree with you that the media is not helping our anxiety with this. They're just trying to get eyes onto their screens.
Exactly right.
And that's unfortunate.
You are the school psychologist at Solomon Schechter in Queens, correct?
Yes. And I have a private practice in Manhattan.
And you have private, okay. First of all, I want to know, anyone who is a patient of yours is a very lucky person. And I hope everybody has heard you and that they understand. You're an unusual human being, and you're an unusual physician in your field. I do want to have a sense, what is the panic level of students? I assume Solomon Schechter right now is closed, correct?
Solomon Schechter in Queens is not closed. So I live in Westchester County. So Westchester County, and I'm in New Rochelle specifically, which is the hotbed for corona right now. So everyone who is a member of my synagogue has been in quarantine now since last Tuesday. I was tested thankfully negative. But I've been staying home because that's what I've been ordered to do by the county health department. Schechter Queens is in Queens. So in Queens, they have not yet had any cases in our school. We are preparing accordingly. We are ready for virtual learning, and teachers have been trained in that, and students have been trained in that.
Are children scared?
You know, in speaking with my colleagues, they have been going in and talking with the students. I think some are. We're trying our best. I haven't been there because I've been quarantined, so I've been hearing about it secondhand. I think there are some that are scared. I know that my own children have had anxiety about this. In the beginning of the quarantine, it was much worse. You know, you were hearing questions literally of, are we going to die? And, now that they've heard of many of their, friends or people within our community who are testing positive and asymptomatic or mild symptoms, they're a little less nervous. Now, there obviously are some people who are very, very ill, and we wish them speedy recoveries. But I think when you look at the statistics of number of cases where it gets to that severity, I think that's alleviated some of the anxieties. But students and young children are definitely hearing this hysteria from the media, and it does have an impact on them. There's no question.
Yes. Rafi, I have loved meeting you on the phone. I hope I get to meet you in person. I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha. You and your family should stay safe, healthy. You should get back to work as soon as possible. And when this is over, I hope there's a way in which you and I can meet in person. Thank you very, very much for everything you do.
I would love that. And make sure you lock your apartment door tonight.
Thank you very much. Be well.
All right. Bye-bye.
The thoughts of Dr. Rafi Kalman, school psychologist at Solomon Schechter Day School of New York, who's also in private practice in Manhattan. Well, I don't know how many answers I've been able to provide for you. It's so clear, isn't it, that the medical profession still does not really know how the coronavirus works in detail. And what they're doing is trying to give us strategies to live with that they believe will significantly decrease the chances of any of us contracting the virus. But I'm going to keep trying to get more answers for you. And look, I watch anchors on all the networks. Anchors on television are often invested with an authority and with knowledge, even wisdom, that they rarely deserve. And so, I'm just a person. I happen to be a rabbi who hosts a Jewish television channel. But I'm like everyone else. I have no secret knowledge. What I have is an opportunity to probe and to try to ask questions for you and for me. But really, I simply wanted to be with you in the only way that I can, through television and JBS. And I want every one of you to know that if you feel frightened, or you feel alone, or you feel you must hunker down in your homes, please know I am with you. I feel for you. I care about you. And JBS is with you. Everyone here on the JBS staff is with you. Happily, by the way, virtually the entire JBS staff is young and healthy. They're not going anywhere. To the contrary. As Jewish life seems to be shutting down, we will do our best to provide you with hours and hours of outstanding and entertaining Jewish programming. We're already in talks with many organizations that may want us, JBS, to bring their events and programs to you. I've been speaking with Rabbi Mark Schneier. We may be able to expand our Shabbat services for you. And the people whom you know through JBS, Tisha Bader, Shachar Azani now, Rabbi Mordechai Becher, Micha Halpern, Eric Goldman, everyone here on JBS, we're going to stay with you throughout this chaotic time. And again, to any of you for whom this is particularly hard, I'm really, really sorry. And you know, given my age and medical history, I need to be one of those who's extra careful. But I will be with you through this as well. JBS has created a virtual Jewish community throughout America. I'm very proud of that. We all here at JBS are proud of that. And it's all the more important to all of us during this crisis. My hope is yours. This shouldn't last too long, and no life should be lost. And whatever is, and we will be with you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.